Hello friends, welcome to my channel. This is Medical Link and I'm Dr. Prashant Gupta, and today we'll be talking about how to solve questions asked on anemia and what are the important points to be focused while solving a case of anemia. So let's begin. So in step 1, we need to look for any characteristic feature of anemia. Patient may be fatigued, they may be having shortness of breath, pallor, angina or tachycardia, and any special feature that is suggestive of a particular anemia. And step 2, we will go through the lab findings. In lab findings, you will see low hemoglobin, which may be microcytic, normocytic or macrocytic. If the mean cell volume is less than 80 femtoliter, then it is microcytic. In normocytic, the mean cell volume is 80 to 100 femtoliter, and in macrocytic, the mean cell volume is more than 100 femtoliter. So if you look at the RBC, RBC has central pallor. This is the RBC has central pallor. If the central pallor is more than half the disc, then it is microcytic hyperchromic anemia. And in macrocytic anemia, there is no central pallor. In macrocytic anemia, there is no central pallor seen in RBC. And if it is normocytic, then we have to look for reticulocytosis. In normocytic, we look for reticulocytosis. And remember, whenever there is a ferritin level given, the ferritin level is opposite from the total iron binding capacity level. If the ferritin level is high, then total iron binding capacity will be low. And if the ferritin level is low, then total iron binding capacity level will be high. Now, what are the points to be remembered to suspect microcytic hypochromic anemia? So step 1 is to look for following keywords in the question. See if anything has been asked about female in premenopausal period or elderly patient with anemia, fatigue and weight loss, or if the question is asking about pregnancy causing dilutional anemia or third world country child. So if these points are included in the question, then you can suspect microcytic hypochromic anemia. Now in the second step, we have to look for lab findings, and in case of iron deficiency anemia, we have 3 stages: first stage, second stage and third stage. In first stage, there is iron deficiency without anemia. This is the latent iron deficiency anemia, where there is iron deficiency but there is no anemia. That is, hemoglobin level is normal and the iron store is decreased. That is, there is decrease in ferritin level. So in latent iron deficiency anemia, hemoglobin level is normal and there is decrease in ferritin level. And in the second stage, there will be decrease in ferritin, there will be decrease in serum iron, and there will be increase in total iron binding capacity. So whenever there is decrease in ferritin level, there will be increase in total iron binding capacity. And in the third stage of iron deficiency anemia, there will be low MCV, there will be low mean cell volume, there will be increase in red cell distribution width, and there will be increase in FEP. FEP is free erythrocyte protoporphyrin. So there will be increase in free erythrocyte protoporphyrin in third stage of iron deficiency anemia. Now coming to anemia of chronic disease. In anemia of chronic disease, in the question you have to look for any past medical history suggestive of any high inflammatory state. Example: rheumatoid arthritis, SLE, chronic infection, etc. So in question, if there is any past medical history suggestive of high inflammatory state like rheumatoid arthritis, SLE, or any chronic infection, so you should be thinking of anemia of chronic disease. In anemia of chronic disease, there will be increased trapping of iron in the bone, which will cause release of interleukin 1. So there will be increased trapping of iron in the bone. And hepcidin level, which is an acute phase reactant. Hepcidin is an acute phase reactant, and hepcidin increases in this case. So there will be increase in hepcidin, which will cause decrease in iron absorption. So whenever there is increase in hepcidin, which is an acute phase reactant, there will be decrease in iron absorption. In lab finding of anemia of chronic disease, you will see there is high level of ferritin and low total iron binding capacity. So the ferritin level will be increased and TIBC will be decreased. In thalassemia, you have to look for important features. In thalassemia, see if there is any characteristic feature showing hair on end appearance, chipmunk faces, history of chronic transfusion, or target cells on peripheral blood smear. And in thalassemia, the lab findings will be increase in serum iron, increased ferritin level, and there will be decrease in TIBC, that is total iron binding capacity, and there will be decrease in mean cell volume. Now let's summarize the lab findings of microcytic hypochromic anemia. So in iron deficiency anemia, there is decrease in serum iron. There is decrease in serum iron, and there will be decrease in iron storage form. So there will be decrease in ferritin level. Whenever there is decrease in ferritin level, there is increase in total iron binding capacity, and the mean cell volume is low, and the percentage transferrin saturation will be low. So there will be decrease in percentage transferrin saturation. In anemia of chronic disease, there will be decrease in serum iron, whereas there is increase in ferritin level. Whenever there is increase in ferritin level, there is decrease in total iron binding capacity, and the mean cell volume may be normal or may be decreased, and the percentage transferrin saturation will be normal or decreased. And in thalassemia, there will be increase in serum iron, and there will be increase in ferritin level. When there is increase in ferritin level, there is decrease in total iron binding capacity, and the mean cell volume is low, and the percentage transferrin saturation will be increased. So there will be high percentage of transferrin saturation in case of thalassemia. In sideroblastic anemia, there will be increase in serum iron with increase in ferritin level. So there will be decrease in total iron binding capacity with low mean cell volume. So what we see here is that there is decrease in serum iron in case of iron deficiency anemia and anemia of chronic disease. In iron deficiency anemia and anemia of chronic disease, there will be decrease in serum iron, whereas serum iron will increase in case of thalassemia and sideroblastic anemia. In iron deficiency anemia, there is decrease in ferritin level, whereas there will be increase in ferritin level in case of anemia, thalassemia and sideroblastic anemia. So ferritin level and total iron binding capacity, they are opposite to each other. So whenever there is decrease in ferritin level, there will be increase in TIBC, and in all these cases ferritin level is increased. So there is increase in ferritin level, so there will be decrease in total iron binding capacity. So it's important to know these lab findings. Now coming to macrocytic anemia. Macrocytic anemia is seen in vitamin B12 deficiency and folate deficiency. In case of vitamin B12 deficiency, there is neurological deficit, whereas in folate deficiency there will be no neurological deficit. In case of macrocytic anemia, so you have to look for hypersegmented neutrophil. So these are the characteristic feature. Hypersegmented neutrophil, hemoglobin will be low with high mean cell volume of more than 100 femtoliter, and there will be marked reticulocytosis, most commonly seen in vegetarians. Another characteristic feature is hyperpigmented knuckles. So these knuckles will be hyperpigmented, so it will look blackish. These areas will look black, or it will be hyperpigmented. And in the question, you have to see if the patient is suffering from pernicious anemia, or if the patient has undergone gastrectomy, or the patient has malabsorption syndrome like Crohn's disease, which is the lesion of terminal ileum, or if there is any history of fish tapeworm, that is Diphyllobothrium latum. Now also look for autoimmune stigmata. In case of macrocytic anemia. So macrocytic anemia may be associated with Hashimoto's thyroiditis, adrenal insufficiency, which is autoimmune adrenalitis, albinism, where there will be autoimmune melanocyte destruction, and pernicious anemia, where there is autoimmune loss of intrinsic factor. In these cases, there will be autoantibodies that are directed towards antigen. These are type 2 hypersensitive reaction. So in macrocytic anemia, you have to see if there is any type 2 hypersensitive reaction. Now coming to normocytic anemia. In normocytic anemia, there will be low hemoglobin with normal mean cell volume, that is in between 80 to 100 femtoliter. In case of normocytic anemia, there will be increased reticulocyte count. So what is reticulocyte? Reticulocyte represents how the bone marrow responses to anemia. So it is a response of the bone marrow to anemia. Now talking about hemolysis. Hemolysis can either be intravascular hemolysis or extravascular hemolysis. In case of intravascular hemolysis, the lab findings will be there will be low haptoglobin with hemoglobinuria. There will be increase in LDH, and there will be high indirect bilirubin. So intravascular hemolysis is associated with low haptoglobin, hemoglobinuria, increase in LDH, and increase in direct bilirubin. Intravascular hemolysis is seen in microangiopathic hemolytic anemia, which includes hemolytic uremic syndrome and thrombotic thrombocytopenic purpura. They may also be seen in prosthetic heart valve and paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria. Whereas in extravascular hemolysis, there will be splenomegaly and normal haptoglobin. So haptoglobin level is decreased in case of intravascular hemolysis, whereas it is normal in case of extravascular hemolysis. Extravascular hemolysis is seen in autoimmune hemolytic anemia. It is seen in autoimmune hemolytic anemia, hereditary spherocytosis, G6PD deficiency, and thalassemia. So this much for today, and we'll be discussing different types of anemia in detail in our further videos. Till then, thank you and best wishes ahead. We'll see you in the next video.